Welcome back to the channel. Today we are building and painting Lieutenant Titus, and we're creating a duel between him and an unfortunate Rubric Marine. This was inspired heavily by both Space Marine 2. There's a particular cutscene in there where the Ultramarines, battling through, various members of the Thousand Suns, and it releases all this purple energy. And I wanted to try and capture some of that in the build today. In addition, in the secret level episode on Amazon Video, there's a particular fight scene in there that really highlighted the agility and dexterity of the Space Marines, and I felt that was really true to the lore. So we're going to try to emulate some of the poses and almost contortion during close combat that you see in that episode. Hope you like the video. It's the result of about 5 hours of footage cut down into about 20 minutes from about 10 hours total project time on this piece, which was all I had available this week. So hope you enjoy. Drop us a like, comment. It would be absolutely fantastic if you hit subscribe. So join me at the desk. Let's get to it. I'm Dan, and you're watching The Hobby Void. Okay, so the usual little commemorative box for Titus here, and this is a box I've had a good few years of Rubric Marines. I think I built a kill team from them previously and didn't need all the miniatures, so I've got a couple left on the sprue. Pretty standard single sprue for Titus and a little transfer sheet, but I did 3D print this 70mm square base because I didn't have one. So I'm just going to alter Titus's arm. I don't want that chainsword sort of above his head as it is there when it outstretched, so I think I'll swap that for an intercessor arm from a box of bits. Just trying to find something a little more straight, and we'll get that on there. I want a forehand slice is what I'm trying to achieve here. Okay, so the Rubric Marine will keep this reasonably standard, except I will use, there's a great arm from an intercessor where they're drawing the knife, and you can sort of put that across him there, and I've sliced the top of the bolter off where the chainsword has cleaved through it. So we're going to make some sparks out of some thin 1mm hobby wire. I'm going to glue that together into a point, and those sparks will emanate from where the chainsword is striking the Rubric Marine. A little bit of gap filling with some green stuff, something I need to practice a lot more of. But it looks okay, they're in the position that I want. So Macragge Blue, let's just get this base coat, standard base coat on Titus. I appreciate I'm mixing in the airbrush there, that's not best practice, but it's working for me okay. We'll just get that nice and even over a nice black prime. Teclis Blue, now so all the light, the main light source is going to come from the front really where the chainsword is. But I just want to pick out a couple of secondary highlights as well. Now because that desaturates the miniature, I'm just a very thin, almost all over glaze with Ultramarines Blue to resaturate that image and make it super blue. As you can see, it's gone up a level. Thousand Suns Blue for our rubric. Now there's lots of, a lot of time you could paint this all gold and then fill in the blue, or paint it blue and fill in the gold. But we're going to try some non-metallic gold on this, so I'm going to paint it blue first. Again, nice even base coat. We'll use the Baharoth Blue just to light up the front of that Marine. Again, all that light is going to come from the sparks from the chainsword. So it'll be quite dark on the back, light on the front. Okay, just a bit of hot dark pink. I'm being lazy here and just seeing how much I can get done with the airbrush, purely for speed. Hopefully I'm not going to make any mistakes and have to repaint the blue. So far so good. And a little bit of ivory again just makes layering up those lighter colours a lot smoother just on the loincloth. Okay, onto the wet palette. If you've watched my videos before, you know I am a fan of the wet palette. Appreciate not everyone is, but it works for me. Bit of dark turquoise, you could use Teclis Blue. I'm just itching to use some more of my Pro Acrylic paints. I'm quite enjoying them at the minute. Macragge Blue is on the palette to go back and fix mistakes with. It's just there, it's for convenience. So I'm doing a slight dilution here just to allow me to do some edge highlighting. Now we're going to go back and do the main highlighting later on. For me, I'm just sort of learning my way around the model, figuring out where all the panels are. You don't have to edge highlight this first stage, because we're going to lose some of those edge highlights in the later stages, and we'll go back and redo them, but you could just wait till later. I'm just navigating the model. So Black Templar contrast paint, I love this as a regular black paint. I don't really use it as a contrast paint, I just find it flows nice, it covers well. Highly recommend it for general work with black. We're just blocking in those black details. Now we're going to let it down quite heavily and use it as a panel liner and just run it into all those crevices with a nice sharp point on the brush. So I'm using a Rosemary & Co Series 33 size 3 brush for this entire model. I'm not using double O's, triple O's, this has just got a nice point on it, and the entire model's done with that one brush. Okay, this is optional. If you want to just use some Retributor armour like this, go for it. I'm trying to push myself with non-metallic metal, so this is me going up in 4 stages. So we're going to start with Mournfang Brown, cover all of the areas in gold. We're then going to go with Scrofulous Brown, and again think about where that main light source is. It's going to be at the front, so that's where we're going to place those reflections. I'm going to put a little bit at the back and towards the top, otherwise the entire thing will just be brown. So it makes a little bit of yellow into Scrofulous Brown, just so it's a more gentle transition, and just paint the highlight in a slightly smaller space. We're leaving about 1 millimetre of the previous colour at each end showing. Now we're going to work up into Ice Yellow by Vallejo. I really love this colour, it just covers really well. And that's going to be our brightest highlight. And we're also going to do an edge highlight with that as well. And the edge highlight, it really finishes it off and sells that metallic effect. I'm certainly not trying to give you a masterclass in non-metallic metal, because this is something I'm on a learning journey about as well. And I'm trying to practice at every opportunity. So far so good. We'll repeat the exact same thing with the Aquila on the chest and all of the other gold sort of trinkets and things that you can see I've got the Mournfang down on already. Just taking my time, enjoying the process, and then all of a sudden, before your very eyes, it starts to read like it's gold, and it's quite satisfying. Okay, so I've done the bottom of the pistol holster there. You don't have to use these paints, any black, grey, white. We're doing the same with the gunmetals here. You could just use some lead belcher, but again, I'm trying to push myself. So we've started off, made sure that they're black. We've done a little bit of a dark grey mix with the black, up to mid-grey, then into light grey. Something like Adeptus Mechanicus grey would be a good alternative to the mid-grey that I'm using, which we've used on the loincloth, and we're just slowly mixing in 3 additional layers of white. So we're adding a little bit of white into the grey. Okay, so on to some highlighting. We're going to do some volumetric highlighting. So we look at this Sophia, we can see the shape of it due to how the light is placed. Imagine that as a knee pad or the top of a shoulder pad. That's the approach we're going for. We're going to work up in successively lighter glazes. These are really thin layers from the Crag blue and the Teclis blue. Imagine the cylinder is the leg of the Space Marine. Again, we're going to place the light at the front because that's where we know the light source is going to be, in increasingly lighter layers. Again, there's some fantastic painters who do this wonderfully and produce these full non-metallic metal armour effects. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. So again, think of our shoulder pad as the top half of a sphere, and we will try and emulate the shadows and highlights that we saw on those artist shapes there as our reference. Again, the abdomen there is a cylinder. And we've obviously got 2 spheres on top of the backpack. So we'll take those highlights a step further and really try and make them look a bit more reflective. Again, we can see that lighter section up the center of Titus's left leg. I'm going to bring a nice stripe reflection into the middle of the abdomen and the center of the leg and just smooth it out using really thin coats of paint, going over and over this probably 5 or 6 times to try and get it as smooth as we can. Start to see that effect coming through now. It's like the non-metallic metal, it's like trust the process, and then all of a sudden starts to come good. So we'll finish that with a more traditional heavy metal style edge highlight. Again, use the sculpt on the side of the brush to do most of the work for you. Tip of the brush anywhere you need to. And again, I always say this, I move the model to suit my hand. I don't move my hand to suit the model because it feels unnatural and you get a bit shaky. So there's our armour done. Quite happy with that. Pick out some of the details now with the Morn Fang, and then we'll start to mix in some Ashabdi bone in greater and greater quantities. And we'll do 2 or 3 passes with more Ashabdi bone mixed in each time, just to try and get some nice sort of blended, smooth, well, layered highlights, as it were. That's almost pure Ashabdi bone now. Do exactly the same on the banner. So some light grey, again, you know, the standard Mechanicus grey is absolutely fine here. We'll add a little touch more white and do a final highlight. Again, use the edge of the sculpt. Got a few scratches and things added there as well, and on the bolter. So on the head, we've base coated rat skin flesh, and I'm going with the beige red from Vallejo. So the beige red is about a 50-50 mix with the rat skin flesh, and then we'll work up to a pure beige red, covering slightly less than previous. And now we'll finish off with some ivory again on those really prominent areas, tip of the nose, eyebrows, top of the cheekbones and the chin. Just helps give that face a little bit more depth. So we've added the eyes, the teeth, the tongue and the stud work on the head as well. Lots to cover there, and we can do that in a separate video. So there is Titus pretty much there. Moving on to our Rubric Marine, and because I'm a sucker for punishment, I'm going to practice this non-metallic metal again. Exactly the same process as before. We won't go into too much detail here. We'll build up those layers through those 4 colours. We showed you earlier the scrofulous brown, into the yellow, into the ice yellow, and we'll just make sure that we've got some nice edge highlights in ice yellow to try and sell that effect. Now I'm hoping that people will be looking at Titus and not too much at this guy, who really is almost a bit of a prop. And here's our victim. And there he is after another hour's work. Just a sort of quick non-metallic effect. And we're on blue. We've mixed that into a glaze, so it's quite thin. We've not got lots on the brush, we're not using it like a wash, we're just glazing with it. Again, think of our volumetric highlighting from earlier. There's our cylinder, there's the top of our sphere. Take any white and your favourite yellow. My favourite part of Rubric Marines, the stripes that appear in various places over them. So I start off alternating with an undercoat of white, just to allow the yellow to pop a little more and to appear brighter instead of putting it straight onto the blue. And then black Templar again, a little bit watered down just to help it flow. And I find taking the time to run the black into the lines there, into the crevices, is really worth it. It really helps make this effect look a lot smarter. And then we're just going to run an edge highlight of Baharoth blue along the top of the blue stripes. You could highlight the yellow as well. And then Baharoth blue just as a standard edge highlight. Again, thinking about that the light is at the front of this model, that's where most of the highlights are going to get picked up. So I wasn't entirely happy with the transition on that shoulder pad, so we're just taking a very, very dilute amount of Techless blue. It's really transparent, you can barely see it, and glazing that over the shoulder pad, and that will just help soften that transition. And then we'll just put a touch of white through the hot dark pink and use that as our highlight colour. Next we'll take our favourite mid grey, neutral grey in this case, but I say Mechanicus grey is fine, and again thin this right down and build up layers. Wanted to try and create an effect where the weapon has been sheared off and it's got a slight sort of molten glow. Okay, so using some very thin down white acrylic paint, and we're just dropping that into the runes. You can obviously use like a well thinned oil paint and they work really well, but for speed we're going with acrylic. Okay, so I've taken some mahogany and made a super thin glaze. This is, 80-90% water. You can see how transparent it is there, and we'll just glaze that into the crevices to give that sort of tabard, that loincloth bit of definition. I'll take some fluorescent pink and just drop it over the white to give those runes a little bit of colour. Okay, so basing, because the Rubric Marine is a little bit shorter and I need to increase the height, we're going to create some steps. Now this scene was inspired, I think it was set in like a temple setting, so this will be like a stone step. So we're going to use some milliput. Use a little bit of wax paper that you get with blue tack, just helps with the adhesion when you're rolling it out. I'm using my professional rolling pin there, which is a bottle of primer, just to flatten that out. And then with wet fingers, bit of water on them, we'll just spread that over, trim off the excess and patch it up. We're going to smooth all this out anyway, and it doesn't need to be super smooth because we want it to look like natural stone. Use a straight edge just to cut the initial squares in the stone floor. And I'm using a piece of slate to make some imprints and keep turning the slate so you don't get a repeat pattern. Then I'm using a silicon tipped sculpting tool to just bevel the corners, put some imperfections in there so they're not all perfect squares, and there you can see the stone finish. Paint it grey, and then we'll dry brush with a little bit of light grey, pin our models in place, and then we'll colour with, well, we'll use some white ink to put where we want our reflections, our highlights. They're going to come from those sparks on the floor as well. And then we'll go in with the pink paint and just cover where we covered with the white ink to give that OSL, that object source lighting type effect. It's very subtle. Don't want to undo all the work that we've done on the blue armour. Really small use of the trigger, 0.2mm needle. There's a small piece of hobby wire that we have bent and coloured. Glue that in place. We'll just try and set it with some activator just to make life a little bit easier. So here was the scene that inspired us. Let's see if we got anywhere close. do give us a thumbs up or drop a comment, and it would be great if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.